Hello once again, fellow devotees of digital design. Rob Mize here, and today I would like to share with you a project I had quite a bit of fun with, using After Effects to laser blast text, shapes, and even logos into backgrounds. Be they fabric, wood, rock, or steel, none can withstand the searing might of the After Effects laser and your imagination. So let's get started. Create a new comp. I'm using 800 by 600 here. I'll name it text and add the text we want our laser to carve out. LaserWriter. Go to Layer, Create Shapes from Text. Boom! Now we have a shape layer that we can open to reveal a separate shape for each letter and the negative space inside a letter, or the counter as it's known to typographers. Set fill to none and stroke color to black and stroke width at 2 pixels. The visibility of the text layer should be off. Now I want these shapes to animate on, and there are a number of ways to do that. However, I found this technique worked best for me. Next to your shape contents, click the Add button and choose Trim Paths. You'll see this parameter added beneath your shapes. You'll have a value of 0 for start and 100 for end. Add a keyframe for end down to the 20-second mark in your timeline. Then come back to the beginning and change the value to 0. Now you're animating the path for this group of shapes. Change Trim Multiple Shapes to individually. Run through this a few times and consider how the shapes are animating on. I want the letters to animate on before their counters, or the openings, so in this case of the A, I'll bring the shape letter above its counter. The E's look fine, but I need to bring this I shape above its dot, or tittle as it's known. You may want to change the direction of the animation for some shapes. Control this by choosing the appropriate reverse path direction on/off button. You can see the effect on this letter L. Now I want the animation to begin at this point, so I'll right-click on this control point, choose Mask and Shape Path, Set First Vertex. Now this is the point from which your path will animate, like so. These shape paths are the basis for the rest of your animation, so take time to ensure you have them arranged the way you want. Now get ready for some heavy-duty copying and pasting, as each of these shape paths will be used to create a motion path that will be used for many of the elements we're going to add. We'll use one of After Effects' handiest capabilities here, and that's the ability to copy mask or shape paths and then paste those paths onto other layers as masks, shapes, and even as motion paths, and that's what we'll do here. Create a new null object and name it Motion Path. You'll paste a series of keyframes in its position parameter to create a motion path in the shapes we've just created. Go to the shape path of the first shape, the L. Copy it with Command C. Click the position parameter of the null layer and use Command V to paste the shape you've just copied. The duration of this path defaults to 2 seconds. But we'll just get the paths on the layer for now, and we'll adjust the timing later. Go to the last keyframe in this motion path and advance 1 frame. Go to the next shape layer, use Command C to copy it, come back up to the null layer, to the position parameter, and use Command V to paste it. Go 1 frame past the last keyframe in this motion path. Now come back down into the shape layer, choose the next shape path. That will be the opening in the letter A. Command C to copy it, come up to the position parameter of the motion path, Command V to paste it. So I will use Command Shift right arrow key to jump ahead 10 frames. These keyframes are all highlighted, so I'll use Alt and click the last keyframe and drag it back to my time indicator. This will compress the 60 frame motion path down to 10 frames. This seems about the right timing to me relative to the time that it takes to draw on the actual letter. Now you're going to continue copying these shapes and pasting them in the motion path layer all the way down this series of shapes. Now you might consider it a bit tedious, but it is part of the work that we've chosen. I've often thought how lucrative it would be to be paid by the click instead of the job. But anyway, you can churn through this in just a few minutes. Once we've pasted all our shapes, let's adjust the timing to match the 20-second duration of our trim path animation. Highlight all the frames, hold down Alt, and drag the last keyframe to compress all these down to the 20-second mark. Right-click on these keyframes and you'll see that Rove Across Time is checked, and so it is for the individual shapes. But click Rove Across Time and the keyframes change to Easy In Out keyframes. Right-click again, choose Rove Across Time, and now the entire group of shapes rove across time as a single path. Now the time you've spent here has created a motion path that will control much of what follows in this project. Let's now add our laser. Create a new solid. Choose Effect, Generate Beam. Set the length to 100% and position the starting point so that it originates off screen. Alt-click the stopwatch for the ending point to open up the expression field, and pick whip this effect down to the position parameter of your motion path. Now the ending point of your beam will trace the motion path you pasted from the shape paths. I'm going to fatten up the starting thickness of this beam and taper down the ending thickness to give it a sense of dimension and depth. And I'll adjust these colors to make them look just a bit hotter. Now let's add the material our beam is going to carve. In this case, we've chosen a metallic background. I got this from cgtextures.com, a terrific resource for useful and high-quality images, and you can't beat the price. They're free. I'll drag this into my comp underneath my shape layer and adjust the scale and position to lose this highlight. And now I'll pre-comp this layer and name it background. Change the track matte to alpha inverted matte. This will take the strokes of the outline and use them to carve the outline through our metallic background. At this point you can see the timing of our beam and the animation of the shape paths need adjustment so that the beam appears to carve that path. However, first I'm going to add some action to that beam that will allow me to be a little less than exact here. Let's show the heated metal created by our laser blast. Create a new solid and call it Glow. Add the CC Particle Systems to effect. Set birth rate to 4, longevity to 2 seconds. Alt-click the Producer Position stopwatch to open the expression field. Pick whip this parameter down to the null position where we earlier linked the endpoint of our laser. Now these two elements will animate together. Set radius X to 0.5 and Y to 0. Animation type doesn't matter because our physics settings are all going to be set at 0. Particle type is shaded and faded sphere. Birth size 0.1, depth size 0.15. Size variation leave it 50%. Opacity map fade out sharp. Max opacity 75%. Color map birth to death. I'm going to lighten up this yellow a little bit and deepen the red and change the transfer mode to add. Now our laser leaves a glowing trail of vaporized metal behind it. Now let's return to our glow's birth rate and lose the glow between these letters. Add a keyframe at the start of the timeline. Hold down Alt Command and click to make this a hold keyframe. Advance to when this letter is complete and change that value to 0. It will default to a hold keyframe. Advance to when the A begins forming and change the value back to 4 to add a keyframe. Just work your way through these letters, turning the glow on as it traces the letters and off as it moves between them. Again, this is just detail work that you have to plow through. And remember, you can nudge the position of highlighted keyframes with the Alt and left or right arrow keys. We'll use this same animation to control our laser. Alt-click the time stopwatch of the laser and now pick whip this to the glow birth rate. Now the time equals 0 and 4, but we want it to equal 0 and 50. So we'll modify this expression by adding times 12.5 to the end of the expression, because 12.5 times 4 equals 50, the value we want. Now your laser and glow disappear between the strokes of the letters. Now we have a couple of adjustments to make here. Let's first add some keyframes to our trim paths parameter to adjust the progression of the strokes in the metal to match our laser blast. And remember, the glow will allow us to be less than perfect here. I'll hit the space bar to play forward on the timeline, and when I see the strokes either precede or lag behind the glow, I'll stop, add a keyframe, and make the proper adjustment. I'll work my way through until I get to the end of the animation. Now let's add a little more action to our blast. Use Command D to duplicate the glow effect and name this layer Flame. First, we'll take advantage of the animations we've already created. Click the stopwatch of the birth rate to delete all the keyframes here. Then Alt-click the stopwatch and pick whip that to the birth rate of the glow so that it also turns off between letters. We'll reduce the birth rate by a value of 2 by modifying the simple expression that's been created for us. We'll add a -2 to the end of this expression. That will give us a birth rate of 2. Longevity, 0.5. Position. Since we copied this from our glow layer, its position is already linked to our motion path layer's position. Radius X, 0.5. This will give us just a little action in our flame. Radius Y, leave it 0. Animation, direction. Velocity, 0.1. Inherent velocity, set to about 40. Direction, 77. Particle type, shaded and faded sphere. Birth size, 0.3. Depth size, 0.15. Size variation, 50%. Opacity map, fade out. Max opacity, 25%. Transfer mode, add. Now we have a flame that animates along with our glow and our laser as it moves through these letters. Let's complement our effect further by adding some smoke. Duplicate the flame layer and call this new layer Smoke. The birth rate is already linked by expression to the glow birth rate. Again, you can adjust this by modifying the expression with plus or minus and the number that yields the desired result. I'm happy with this as it is. Longevity, 2. Again, the position is already linked to our motion path position. Radius, X and Y, leave it 3. Animation, explosive. Velocity, 0.1. Inherent velocity, 25. Gravity, minus 0.5. Particle type, shaded and faded sphere. Birth size, 0.05. Depth size, 1. Size variation 100%. Opacity map fade in and out. Max opacity 34%. First change transfer mode to screen, then come back and adjust the color. I've sampled the color of my metallic background, and I'll just lighten that up a bit. Once our laser has carved out our text, we'll use the shatter effect to allow our background to fall away, leaving our letters mysteriously suspended in space. If you haven't seen Jesse Tula's tutorial on custom shatter maps, I highly recommend it in order to understand what's happening inside After Effects to create this action. Let's return to our original text. Turn visibility on add a new solid. Make it any color other than white. Pre-comp the text and solid layers and call this Shatter Map. Turn off the visibility of this pre-comp. All right, I have returned after a brief respite. Let's resume our project by creating a new shape, and we'll make that a gradient, and we'll use that to control our shatter effect. So with no layers selected, we can double-click our rectangle tool, and that creates a new rectangular shape for us. Let's go up to Fill and make that a linear gradient. And we see that it's a bit more complex than our ordinary gradient. If we take a look at that, we'll see there are 3 color stops here with black in the center of 2 white color stops. And we need this a bit more complex because I want to use this to make the openings in the letters pop out before the background itself falls away in the shatter effect. And we'll try that right there. We may have to come back and adjust that in a few moments. Let's drag this down to the bottom of our comp and turn that off. We'll choose our background layer and go to Simulation, Shatter. And let me run down these settings. View, Rendered, Render All, Shape, Custom, Custom Shatter, Shatter Map, White Tiles Fixed. This will hold our letters in place, as you can see there. Position 304 and 319. Depth minus 0.03. Radius 5, strength 5. Force 2 we won't use. Gradient threshold, we'll leave that at 0 for the time being. And let's change gradient layer to shape layer. We might as well change the name of that to gradient. Come back to our shatter effect. And rotation speed, let's make that 0.05. Tumble axis free. Randomness viscosity at 1. Mass variance, we can leave that at 30%. Gravity at 3. Gravity direction, I want to change that to 232, and gravity inclination to minus 90. And that's going to control where our background falls. We can place that where we want it. Let's open up Textures, and for side layer, let's make that background. Now let's come to the start of our timeline. And I'm going to turn these other elements off and leave on the glow and the laser so I can see just when the openings in the letters are formed. And at that point, I'm going to adjust my shatter threshold until I see that opening pop out. Let me add a keyframe there and come forward, and when the E is completed, I'll adjust this shatter threshold until I see the opening in the E pop out. Right there. I'll come forward in the timeline till my next E is completed. At that point, and make this next adjustment to reveal that opening. And finally, when the R is traced, there, I'll come forward just a couple of frames and bring the shatter threshold forward until I see the back start to drop away. Now you can see there's an outline around these letters. That's a consequence of the shatter effect and the alpha channel created by our outlines. So let's take care of that. Just as our shatter effect starts, I'll add an opacity keyframe there and come ahead about 3 frames and bring that down to 0. Let me adjust that just a bit. Maybe slow that down some so it's not quite as obvious. And there's our LaserWriter. Add a few sound effects and a few other elements and you've got yourself a nice effect there. And if you want to reverse that effect, you can, but you'll need to make some changes in your gradient and also your text shatter map. And again, I urge you to take a look at Jesse Tula's tutorial. It's terrific information and it's very well presented. I should be so skillful in my own tutorials. I know this has been a long one. It's been a tough one for me too, and I appreciate you all hanging with me. I really appreciate your interest in these tutorials. I always look forward to any feedback you have to offer. So until next time, this is Rob Mize sending you warm regards and wishing you happy compositing.